So sadly, me and Newt Gingrich and Phyllis Schlafly, and the indignant few, right? We're pretty much the only ones saying this, along with Thomas Jefferson. I want to go back and the history of judicial review in this country. Judicial review is the doctrine that the Supreme Court can knock down laws. It's nowhere in the Constitution. It says that the Supreme Court is the final court of appeals with regards to matters of fact and law. In other words, they're the final court of appeals. If Joe sues Bill and one judge says, okay, Joe wins, and then Bill appeals it to another judge, and that judge says, no, Bill wins, or whatever. And it goes back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth. Eventually, the buck has to stop somewhere. That's the Supreme Court. For individual cases. For the first 60 years of this republic, the Supreme Court was often referred to, go back and read your history, as the chickens and dogs court, the dogs and chickens court. Great book on this written by Larry Lawrence. I'm forgetting his last name. He's the dean of the law school at Stanford University, and it's a book on judicial review. Larry Kramer was his name, and it was called the chickens and dogs court because the vast majority of cases, America, this was pre-industrial revolution. The vast majority of the business of America was growing things. We had lots and lots of farmers. And farmers would sue other farmers because that farmer's dog ate this farmer's chickens. And variations thereof. He's moved his fence posts on my land. He moved whatever. And these cases would go through the courts. And if multiple courts ruled in different ways, it had to go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, go back and look at the cases, the caseload of the Supreme Court, the first 30 years of America. Dogs and chickens, dogs and chickens, dogs and chickens. One time in 1803 in Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court ruled that a law, the Judiciary Act of 1798, was unconstitutional, and therefore, in the case of Marbury versus Madison, they were not going to enforce that law. Arguably, they didn't even strike it down. But that set a precedent that so angered Thomas Jefferson. He said, hey, wait a minute. It's not the court's job to decide if Congress passed a law that's constitutional or not. It's up to the Congress to determine what the Constitution means, and it is up to the president to determine what the Constitution means for themselves. And they can pass legislation and sign or veto legislation based on their decision. And the ultimate power in this country lies not with the Supreme Court, it lies with the people themselves. In fact, the people themselves is the title of Larry Kramer's book. As I have pointed out numerous times, as Newt Gingrich on this program has pointed out, as Phyllis Schlafly on this program has pointed out, as numerous other constitutional scholars have pointed out, the whole idea of judicial review is extra-constitutional. It is not constitutional. I know they teach it in civics classes because it's just been that way for so long. They even teach it in law school. I have given this lecture in law schools literally from coast to coast, from Vermont to Oregon. From the Vermont Law School to Lewis and Clark Law School. And a bunch of them in between. And you start out with, whether it's judicial review or whether it's corporations as persons, which is more often the topic when I'm speaking to law schools. Saying, for example, in 1886, did the Supreme Court rule that corporations are persons? Everybody says, yeah, no, they didn't. It's in the head note. It's not in the ruling. The ruling is the exact opposite. But I digress. So somebody asked Thomas Jefferson, if the court, this was after he had retired from the White House and he was living back in Monticello, 1823. And I forget who he wrote the letter to. I'm sorry I don't have that for you, but you should be able to find it online. They asked him, This person said, if the Supreme Court is not going to be the arbiter, as they have asserted in Marbury versus Madison, of what is and isn't constitutional, who is? Somebody has to decide what's constitutional. Here's how Jefferson responded. He said, this case of Marbury and Madison is continually cited by bench and bar as if it were settled law. The Chief Justice says, keep in mind that John Marshall was still Chief Justice at this time. He was the one who decided Marbury versus Madison. The Chief Justice says, there must be an ultimate arbiter somewhere. True, Jefferson writes, there must, semicolon. But the ultimate arbiter is the people.